Hello and thank you for joining us on Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Brandon Yates and today we will be discussing the 2023 Cricket World Cup. We'll take a look at the performances of standout teams and players. We will also talk about the state of the men's game in China, as well as the popularity of the sport on the Asian continent. I'll be getting through these topics with my two fantastic co-hosts, Fuyu and Tianyu. And Tianyu, I have to admit, I'm not the biggest cricket fan or expert.
Me neither.
But just watching this Cricket World Cup, I've had the chance to watch a couple of games and see some performances, and it really has been incredibly exciting. We've seen some phenomenal performances from teams, from players.
Definitely.
We've seen records being broken, and I think this could potentially go down as one of the most entertaining Cricket World Cups of all time. But from your side of things, have there been any standout teams at this point that have really caught your eye?
Well, yeah, I don't know a lot about the sport of cricket, but
You and me both, yeah.
And after I knew that we were about to do cricket this week, and I started searching online the game results and highlights of the Cricket World Cup, and from my observations, I must say that Afghanistan is the team that I found most, that impressed me the most.
Yeah, which is surprising, I think, for a lot of fans, because before the tournament started, nobody gave Afghanistan a chance.
Yeah.
And I think, look, I mean, they're still in the running, and I wouldn't say they're one of the favorites at this point in time, but they've definitely surprised a lot of fans and teams alike, because I think they've also caused a couple of upset results, right?
Yeah, definitely. They kicked off the campaign by getting defeated by Bangladesh and India in the opening games.
Two very strong teams, to be fair.
Yeah. While a lot of people were expecting them to conclude their journey at the tournament by losing every single game.
Myself included. But yeah, they've really surprised me.
Yeah, and they were able to turn the tide and sealed an important victory over England, which is the defending champion of the tournament.
Yeah, and they've been really disappointing at this tournament, right? They got knocked out at a very early stage, and no one was expecting them to do so badly.
It's also surprising for me to see that, because they're the defending champion. And,
There was a lot of expectations on them, and I think a lot of fans actually expected them to retain the title, but they've been very disappointing this year, unfortunately, for England fans.
Yeah, and return to the performance of Afghanistan, I think that was the first time for them to beat England, and also their first victory at the 50-over World Cup for the team.
Wow.
And I think the extent of how surprising this upset can be is like when Japan beat Germany in the last World Cup.
I was scared you were going to say South Africa, because in the 2015 Rugby World Cup, Japan also defeated South Africa, and that was a huge upset, and now I've upset myself by remembering that game.
Yeah, the rise of Asian powers.
Yeah, absolutely, in a variety of sports.
Yeah, and just like what the Afghanistan captain Hashmatullah Shahidi said, the victory was just the start. Even though they were beaten by New Zealand after their win over England, they went on to defeat two more former world champions, Pakistan and Sri Lanka.
Incredible.
Yeah, and also the Netherlands. And I think that was really something for Afghanistan, because when you think about the country, it's usually bad stories like wars, conflicts, and earthquakes.
Yeah. Like general news coverage of Afghanistan is normally surrounded in negativity, I suppose.
Yeah, they're mired down in disasters and sufferings.
Yeah.
But beating England just ushered in like an amazing page in the story of the men's cricket team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and even though they just lost the chance to directly advance into the semifinal due to the loss in the match against Australia, they still managed to give the opponent some hard time and only lost by like a small margin.
And they should be proud of themselves, because Australia have won the tournament 5 times, and they've got some of the best players in the world. So it's still a very admirable performance, despite the fact that they lost. But they put up a really good show.
Yeah, and the final battle against South Africa would be a hard one, I believe.
Absolutely.
And but even if they lost the match, they still had a chance to advance on the net run rate.
Right.
And
But I think Afghanistan's performance and a couple of other performances, I think of the likes of the Netherlands, I think it's great for the game of cricket, because we are also very familiar with the traditional powerhouse teams like England, South Africa, Australia, India. But like you said, teams like Afghanistan that come to the Cricket World Cup and cause a few upsets, I think it's fantastic for the game because it increases the level of competition amongst all of the teams.
And a variety.
Yeah, and it gives variety, and it also makes the tournament itself less predictable. So for someone like me that's not a cricket expert or a huge cricket fan, I'm probably a lot more entertained by this World Cup now because there are so many teams that could potentially cause an upset result or even go all the way to the final.
Yeah. And my point is that it is really remarkable that a team playing in the lowest tier of international cricket about a decade ago is now like shining at the elite level.
Yeah, their ascension through the ranks has been pretty remarkable.
It's incredible how a team who has never played at home and always been worrying about what is going on at home are beating such established cricket powerhouses.
Yeah, and when you have a sports team from a nation that's struggling on other fronts, I think it's always great to have a shining example like that to inspire the people of that nation. So we have to hope that the continued success of Afghanistan at the World Cup and going forward throughout the years, hopefully they can be a source of inspiration and motivation for the fans back at home in Afghanistan. And I think they can definitely hold their heads up high, regardless of how far or not they progress at this World Cup. The Afghanistan national team at the Cricket World Cup have put up a phenomenal performance. And for you, speaking of phenomenal performances, of course, the host nation, India, have been performing very, very well. They're through to the semi-finals, and they are looking like the dominant team so far at this World Cup. And captain Virat Kohli has really stepped up to the plate and has been putting up some sensational performances. Most notably, he's now equaled Sachin Tendulkar's record of the most ODI centuries in international cricket.
Yes.
I believe it's 49 centuries that they're level on now.
And he achieved that during India's game against South Africa.
Of course. Thanks for the reminder. They absolutely smashed us. But yeah, they really are a phenomenal team, and he's a phenomenal player. But when we look at the history of successful cricket players, of course, there's going to be comparisons between Kohli and, of course, the Indian and global great Sachin Tendulkar. So do you think Virat Kohli enters that conversation of going down as potentially one of the greatest cricketers or batsmen, I suppose, in particular, of all time?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not surprised that the record holders are both from India, since India is such a powerhouse in this sport.
Yeah, and it's an obsession in India. I mean, like cricket in
Yes.
India is like football in Brazil. Like it really is like almost a religion.
Yeah, you can call it the national sport of
Absolutely,
India. Like
without a doubt.
yeah, what table tennis is to us in China. Yeah, and the player Kohli. If you look at the stats, the numbers, he definitely ranks among the greatest in the history of this sport. His success and dedication. I mean, if I remember correctly, he scored his first ODI century in 2019. So 14 years later, he's still going.
Yeah.
And,
2009, you mean?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, 2009.
That's a lot of centuries in 4 years, yeah.
Remarkable consistency.
Yeah.
Sure.
Consistency, that's the word. He really has been a standout, consistent performer, not just for India, but in the Indian Premier League as well, for the numerous clubs that he's played for.
Yes, and a player who used to play under his captaincy at the Indian national team says that one of the things that strikes him the most about Kohli is that fire that still burns in him. It's amazing that he's still hungry for success after so many years and so many success in the sport.
On a team and individual level, because like, we've mentioned, he's broken individual records, but he's also won the Cricket World Cup with India. He's won titles in the Indian Premier League. So the fact that he still got, like you said, got that hunger for the game, despite this incredible individual and team success that he's enjoyed, it's pretty remarkable. And I think that's a huge part of his consistency and drive.
Yes, and he's in terms of his involvement in the team you just mentioned, it's another point that I was going to mention. Apart from his professionalism and high level of competition, Kohli seems really know how to help the team and work the crowd. That's why so many players that played with him have grown so much. I think he's partly contributed to the development of this sport in India, and also he knows how to connect with the crowd. Sometimes during a game, if there's a lull, if there's a period where neither side failed to make an impact, you will see Kohli stepping up and asking the crowd for support
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
to make some noise for the game.
Yeah.
So
I think
yeah.
he's got almost a cult-like following in India. So I think he connects with the fans really well. And he does that off the field as well, but particularly on the field, you can see, like you've said, when there's a bit of a lull in play or if India's struggling, he will either step up with his own performances or he will start,
Yes.
enacting mannerisms that really gets the crowd fired up. And I think that also has a knock-on effect on the rest of his Indian team. So his individual performances and his fire in the belly, I suppose, is a great motivator for himself, but also and the fans, but most importantly for his teammates too. And I think that's been a huge element of India's also consistent success.
Yes, and Virat Kohli, this player, he's passionate about his sport.
Very.
He's got commitment, and I think, to some fans, he's a very charming person as well. So when all these qualities, of course, on top of having talent and working hard, when all these qualities, when one player encompasses all these qualities, I think he definitely deserves a place in history.
Yeah.
And also, we're not surprised that you usually find all these qualities in a top sports player in any sport.
Yeah. I think something that connects top players in a variety of sports is what you mentioned earlier, that consistency and that ability to maintain that fire in the belly and that drive for a long period of time. I think of the likes of, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, Cristiano Ronaldo, and now we have Virat Kohli, where they're talented.
LeBron James.
Yeah, LeBron James, where they are supremely talented, but that's not the only defining factor that makes them successful. It's that consistency and that willingness to go after records and titles year after year after year. And I think that's something that Virat Kohli has that's kept him at this level for such a long time and also puts him into the conversation of potentially going down as one of the greatest cricketers, not just in India, but of all time. I think he enters the conversation with the likes of Shane Warne, Brian Lara, Sachin Tendulkar. I think when he does eventually retire and put down the cricket bat, he will be remembered not just for his performances, but like you said, for motivating the fans, motivating his teammates, and for that consistency and drive that he's had for such a long period of time. What a phenomenal cricketer.
Yes, and the World Cup isn't over yet.
Yeah, far from it. Yeah, still a long way to go.
He's still got many opportunities
Chances.
to make his mark.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, to be able to potentially do it in front of his home crowd.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that he's very fired up at this point in time, probably more fired up than he ever has been. Yeah.
Yes.
So a very exciting time to be Virat Kohli and also just to be an Indian fan. Yeah. Go ahead.
For you just mentioned an important point that I want to mention because Kohli has scored 4 centuries this year, and each of his centuries is a lesson in perseverance, showcasing his hunger for runs and his commitment to the team's cause
And concentration, because some of those innings have been very long.
Yeah, and his centuries often come at a time when the team needs him the most.
Yes.
And I think that's an important feature for a player that can be deemed as a GOAT, because you need to stand up for the team when it needs you the most. And
not just when the team's performing well, but when the chips are down and when it looks like your team's going to lose.
Yeah.
He is that sort of player as an individual that can really pull his team up almost single-handedly.
You need to be able to turn the tides when in adversity.
Yeah, and he definitely has that ability.
Yeah.
So I think, there's still a lot of play to go on at this World Cup, and we will still see a lot of outstanding performances, and we already have seen many so far. And in terms of the conversation after the World Cup, I think, like we've already mentioned, he will be in that greatest of all-time conversation. But he's definitely been one of the standout performers at the World Cup so far, without a doubt. And the fact that he's doing it for, his home country in front of his home crowd, what an amazing performance from him that we've seen so far. But Tianyu, have there been any other standout individual performances from players from other countries that you've seen so far?
Well, I've been keeping an eye on the Afghan team. So there's one player in particular in the team that has been, I think, playing quite well at the tournament, and his name is Rashid Khan. He's a leg spinner, which means a type of spin bowling or pitching the ball in cricket.
Yeah.
And Rashid has
very difficult for batsmen to kind of figure out what that ball's going to do when it's that type of delivery.
Yeah. And Rashid has established himself as the country's first globally recognized cricket player. He made his debut at 17 years old in 2015 and has taken over 330 wickets.
Yeah, I think he's the standout player in that team because, not many of the Afghanistan players are well known internationally, but he's definitely developed a name for himself,
the
not just
icons.
in his country, but globally.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely
Yeah.
an icon of that particular team, yeah.
Yeah, and for your information, wicket means he has forced out over 300 batsmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's googleys.
And he's still young.
Yeah, he's still young. Yeah, he's googleys, which is kind of a ball that he's good at throwing and has a trajectory that makes it hard to be hit.
I'm loving all of these cricketing terms. Please keep going.
And his ability to always take wickets have made him a mainstay of his team for over the past 8 years. And it's fair to say that he has been keeping the team afloat single-handedly in previous tournaments. And
Maybe in a Virat Kohli type of role where if the team's not performing particularly well, an individual performance from him can really
like a hero
turn things
from the
around.
team.
Yeah.
And but this year he has got a lot of support from his teammates, the likes of veteran player Mohammad Nabi and Majib or Rahman and Noor Ahmad. These names are really hard to pronounce.
Yes, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job.
And so
Better than I would do.
Thank you. And so the quality of these players and their brilliant performances have been pushing this Afghan team to go further at this tournament.
Absolutely.
Standout players.
Yeah.
South Africa has been a powerhouse in cricket.
Yeah, besides that loss to India.
And they have been doing a great job so far this year's tournament. How about telling us some of the standout players in this team squad?
Yeah, I mean, look, there have been some standouts from South Africa. I think of the likes of Quinton de Kock. I think he's been having a really fantastic Cricket World Cup so far. Themba Bavuma has also been stepping up with the bat. But across the nations, I mean, I think of the likes of, just that most recent game between Afghanistan and Australia, where Australia were really looking like they were going to lose, and Glenn Maxwell stepped up with a double century, which I think is only the third time a player has scored a double century at a Cricket World Cup. So there have definitely been some really fantastic individual performances all across the Cricket World Cup. And like we've already mentioned, things are far from being over, and there are still plenty of stars left in the World Cup, and we could still see a variety of performances and results that could swing things either way. And I still don't think we've seen the best and most memorable performances yet. So I think as the World Cup progresses, still think we're going to see some really exciting action to come. But those are just a couple of names off the top of my head that I think could really step up and potentially take their nation all the way to lift that Cricket World Cup. But when we look at the game itself, for you, of course, it's not a particularly popular sport in China. But I guess there is a Chinese element of cricket that is yet to be explored, and that's something that we can discuss right now. So what is the state of the men's game in particular right now in China?
Actually, the men's national team for cricket started rather late in China. It was officially established in 2019. I got
Okay,
it right
so
this time. It's 2019.
Yeah, so a brand new
4 years
national
ago.
team. Yeah.
Quite new. And they've since been undergone intensive training, both in terms of their body strength and their skills while playing cricket. And according to the coach of the national team, the players have gone from a blank sheet to now being able to complete all their trainings in strength and still run for 5 kilometers.
Okay, so there seems to be a lot of focus on the physical preparation for the sport right
Stamina.
now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And just making sure that they're, physically and mentally prepared for top-level competition, I suppose.
Yeah, which is always a good place to start,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because when you've got the base, you've got the foundation, and you build from there.
Yeah, when you've got like top-level athletes that can, perform a variety of athletic movements and be fit and strong, and have all of those athletic elements, I think, like you said, that's a good base to start from, because with that base, you can kind of mold it to, become or to excel in a sport that they haven't necessarily tried before. And maybe that's something they can do with cricket.
Yes, and when they build up their strength, I think it'll also be very helpful for the coach and players to find out their advantages and weaknesses and work from there to develop this sport as a team effort.
Yeah, that's always been something interesting, I think, about cricket in particular, is that because there's such a variety of nations from different continents, normally certain countries have, genetic abilities that give them an advantage over another team. So, the Australian and South African teams might be stronger than, the Indian or the Pakistan team, but then the Pakistan and India teams might be more skillful or have more speed and more fitness. So it'll be interesting to see over the years what physical and mental elements China have that could potentially make them, a power to be reckoned with in cricket.
Yeah, I really hope that will happen.
Yeah.
Just now, as Tianyu was talking about Afghanistan, how they went from a low-ranking team to shining on the elite stage.
Yeah.
When he said that, I was thinking, I really hope one day that will happen to
China.
China.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with the emergence of one star player. So maybe China has that, that diamond in the rough, that player that could be that individual that kind of pulls up the rest of the national team with him. So it'll be interesting to see if we find that talent over the years.
Yes, but right now, cricket is still a minority sport
Of
in
course,
China. Yeah, but since the Hangzhou Asian Games,
Yes.
it has gained some popularity because the stadiums hosted the cricket teams.
And some of the traditional powerhouse teams were there. I mean, India was
India,
there,
Sri Lanka,
Pakistan, Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so it was.
They had the chance to interact and face some of the best cricketing nations in the world, which must have been a huge learning curve for them.
Yeah, very helpful also for Chinese people, for people who went to the stadiums to know about this sport. So on the first official match day of the Hangzhou Asian Games, that was way before the opening ceremony. A lot of people actually went there to watch the game between Hong Kong and Malaysia. Of course, they support the Hong Kong team.
Of course, naturally, yeah.
Although cricket was not the first choice for many ticket buyers from China, some of them still enjoyed the game. I remember it was very hot, like 35, 40 degrees. A lot of them had to watch the game from under their umbrellas.
And we're missing that weather right now. It's starting to get very cold in China at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, and but the hot weather and other conditions didn't stop them from enjoying the game. In fact, a lot of them became interested after watching the competitions. And one person even said he's interested in coming back to the stadium if it's still open after the Hangzhou Games.
Fantastic.
And try the sport himself.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the best elements of the Asian Games. I mean, having covered it myself and having been in Hangzhou for about 3 weeks, because there were so many sports that were, being participated in at that particular tournament, I think so many fans were exposed to sports that they had never seen before and became interested in new sports.
Yes.
And it sounds like cricket was one of them.
And I really appreciate Chinese people's interest and their willingness to try out new things.
Yeah.
So I think with this emerging in cricket and also its status as the host city of the Asian Games, Hangzhou may become the home or the place where cricket starts growing in China.
And maybe where some talent emerges as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and hopefully because of the global popularity of cricket, I believe cricket is one of the top 3 most popular sports in the world. Hopefully that element will also help Chinese administrators or coaching staff place a lot more emphasis on cricket because of the global popularity of the sport and help grow it in China.
Yeah, it is actually gaining ground at youth level in China.
Yeah, tell me more. Do you have anything to add about the men's game in China?
Yeah, the country just held a national level cricket tournament for teenagers in Shandong province.
And I think that's where we're going to start finding this talent is at the youth level.
Yeah, 29
China's
teams.
Virat Kohli.
Yes, hopefully.
29 teams at primary, middle, and high school levels have participated in the games. And this July, the Chinese men's team just beat Team Myanmar at the Asian qualifier for the ICC Men's T20 World Cup.
Fantastic.
Which is the first win for the team in the international level. So yeah.
Congrats to them.
By 5 wickets to be exact.
Hey, more cricket terms. I love it.
So yeah, I think that cricket is getting more spotlight from Chinese people, and it has some great potential for growth in this country.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to have to keep our eyes on the growth of cricket in this country. It should be very interesting to see maybe in the next 10 to 15 years where China ends up on the global spectre in terms of cricketing success. It should be very interesting to watch. And for you, we've already touched on the global popularity of cricket, but in Asia in particular, it seems to be incredibly popular, probably one of the most popular sports in Asia by quite a long shot, I would say. What do you think makes cricket so popular in Asia?
First, I think the most obvious reason is historical reasons. Cricket originated from England, and if you look at the countries that is most widely received today, like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and even beyond Asia, Australia, South Africa, these are all the places where England was a former colonial
Of
power,
course.
and it had a huge influence. So these countries and regions people in these countries and regions are really interested in cricket. And in terms of India, like we said, cricket is the national sport in this country, and it is so popular there also because India has heavily invested in cricket infrastructure.
Yeah, and they've just had historically so much success as well, which probably
Yes.
also increased its popularity over the years.
Yes, India is actually home to the world's largest cricket stadium. The Narendra Modi Stadium has a seating capacity of 132,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's also the second largest stadium of any sport in the world. So India's historic success in cricket and the infrastructure, these all create conditions for the development of sport. And also when the conditions are met, everything's there, so it's ready for capital to flow in.
Right.
And the Indian Premier League is also has huge potential, commercial potential.
Yeah, it's had heavy amounts of investment, a lot of marketing, and it's also become globally popular. I mean, the Indian Premier League is probably one of the most watched club sporting events worldwide, I would say, when it's on.
Yes, the Indian Premier League was worth around $8.4 billion last year.
And it's still a relatively new league too. I mean, it hasn't been around as long as the likes of the English Premier League and other global sporting club leagues that we are familiar with. So their success rate in such a short period of time is pretty remarkable. So yeah, I mean, I think because of the traditional, elements, the historical elements of, England's influence over the nations that you mentioned there for you, and also just the historical success of teams like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, I think that's led to the sustained popularity of cricket in those continents. And like we've already discussed, there is some potential for the sport of cricket to grow in China, so that should be very interesting to watch over the years. And of course, like we've also mentioned, the Cricket World Cup is not over yet, so we've got plenty of exciting action to look forward to, and we will definitely be keeping an eye on the remainder of the Cricket World Cup this year. But that is all we have time for on this week's episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us, and of course, we will be back next week with our latest topic, and we'll see you then.
This is CGTN Radio. Hear the difference.